Hello everybody and welcome back to the Dovetail box series. In this video, we're going to get the miters cut on the plinths. Let's get going. Okay, so we're approaching the final stages of getting this box complete, and this is one of the many stages in this project where it's possible to cause a lot of damage to the work that you've put in so much effort to up until this point. You really got to be careful at this stage. So firstly, when carrying out any operation at this stage, make sure your work is securely clamped down to the bench, whether that's long ways or on top, whatever. Don't try and hold it by hand when you're doing this, because it's just going to cause it to slip and you might end up digging into the wrong area of the box and causing a fair bit of damage. Those of you who have already cut the profile on the plinth using the router table, as explained in the previous episode, then you're not going to have to worry about any of this. You can forward on to the next step, which is going to be sanding this box to a lovely finish. Those of you that are doing this by hand, let's talk you through it. So you should have a very faint marking gauge line scratched along the top and the side of this plinth, which is what we're going to be working back to. I'm going to get this a little bit closer to the edge of the bench, and that way it gives me more access if I was to do this with a bench plane. If I'm doing it with a shoulder plane, I'll show you both examples in this, then I probably don't need that overhang. I can get it further back onto the bench and maybe even use the bench as a reference surface to cut that 45 degrees. We'll have a look. Okay, so this shoulder plane is just about wide enough to reach the top corner of that edge, meaning that it's going to be wide enough to reference off the bench and also cut the mitre and keep everything at a consistent 45 degrees along the length of that plinth. Now, obviously, if I'm resting it on the bench like that, I need to make sure the blade is flush with this side that's resting down, or else I'm going to start cutting some lovely tracks in the bench. So I'm going to loosen the pressure on top of the blade, push it down flat on the bench while doing so, and that's going to have shifted the blade across, re-tighten it, and now that should easily run along the bench without digging in. We have obviously got to watch out for this bit poking out and making sure that doesn't catch the side of the box here. But the mitre shouldn't be going back far enough to actually hit that surface. So all I'll do now is just keep planing while advancing the blade until we start getting a bite. Lovely. Okay, so the next thing to bear in mind when you're doing this is don't plane through all the way off the back edge. Same as with all the joints and stuff in this box, if you plane off the opposite corner of something whilst you've got grain going across horizontally or perpendicular to that, you're going to cause breakout. And in this instance, you're going to be breaking off that mitre at the back, as that is incredibly fragile, and that'll only take a little knock with the plane to potentially break off that edge. You may be lucky with it, you might be able to mitre it out when you do this side, but it's best just to avoid it at all costs. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to plane all the way through and probably stop around here or something like that, just shy of that mitre, and then I can come from the other side and finish it off later on. So I've got quite a heavy cut going on at the moment while I just remove the bulk of the material, making sure to keep the plane referencing on the bench below. And while you're doing this, look for the line on the top and the line on the side to approach the lines at exactly the same rate. That way you can easily see if you're planing at 45 degrees or not. If you see that it's approaching the top line faster than it is the side one, then you're probably planing a little bit too upright like that, and just focus on tilting it a bit more. So I'm definitely approaching this bottom line too fast, so I'm gonna feel it lock onto the bevel and then bring it up slightly and start planing that top edge. Still a little bit too low, so tilt it up even more. And there we go. So it looks like I've just about hit the line on this side. I think it's just a couple more passes actually. Feel it lock onto the bevel. Okay, so yeah, I'm confident I'm down to the line this side, but obviously as I've been lifting off this end, it's now created a sort of tapered chamfer sort of thing. So I'll come around from the other side, and before I do so, I'm just going to re-flush off the blade with this side of the plane so that I don't start cutting into the workbench. So I'm pretty sure, no, a little bit more to do on there. Still tilting it over slightly too much. I need to focus on getting it upright, or more upright, should I say. So I'm down to depth here, There's just a little bit in the middle which needs to be taken down now. So I'll start it there and just land it on with the plane and then take it off. I'll scoop out the material that I need to. Now there may be little lumps and bumps in it from where, you know, I've got quite a heavy cut on this to hog off the material, and obviously I've done work here first and then work here and then here. There might be little facets in places, but we can flatten that out carefully with sandpaper in the next episode. Not looking to shape it or anything like that, it's just to remove some tiny little lumps and bumps that have been left over. In fact, I'll probably get rid of that one with a plane. That's just me being lazy, that. So if you don't have access to a shoulder plane and you're relying on cutting this mitre with just a normal block plane or a bench plane or something like that, what I would probably do is get it over the edge of the bench like this, so that then you have plenty of clearance underneath in order to shape the mitre. Just be careful that you don't catch the plane too much on the side of the box. You could potentially cover the side of the box in masking tape to prevent it sort of cutting in and leaving marks. That might be a good solution. But unfortunately, with a bench plane or block plane, you won't be able to reference this on the bench while cutting the mitre, because they're usually a bit too wide, and it's obviously bridging across the gap between here and here before it reaches the mitre. To solve this, you could just prop the box up on something like that, and that might bring it up high enough. And there you go, by propping it up, I could probably get access to that mitre now. Lots of ways of doing it. You've got 4 sides here to do, so I'd encourage you just to mess around and see which one works the best. The only things to focus on is 1, don't go off the back edge and break out that mitre, and 2, make sure that you don't cut into the side of the box too much by not focusing on where this corner of the plane is or where the blade is poking out of your shoulder plane. And obviously make sure that the box is firmly clamped down. Don't try and do this while holding it with your hands, because it's just going to wobble and you're not going to get that mitre consistent. To be honest, I'm quite liking the look of this. I might give this a go next. So reference it on the bench, advance the blade until it starts cutting. Go. And lock it in that position while you start planing. And I am going to put a bit of masking tape on here, because as that mitre gets closer and closer, that is going to start hitting the side of the box. And I think I'm going to have to prop this up even higher now, because the plane is now hitting that box before I'm able to actually get the mitre down further. As with every planing operation, if the plane isn't cutting, despite the fact it has done so previously, it's not an indication that you need to bring the blade out more. It's an indication that the side of the plane or the bottom of the plane is hitting a high spot. Do not see it as an excuse to advance the blade further than you need to and create a cut that is incredibly deep and thus start creating veneers. Okay, once again, we're hitting the side of the box. You can see this method does work, but it might just be a bit tedious having to constantly prop up the box from the surface below. So I'm going to try and freehand it now. Let's get this overhanging the side of the bench. So I'm going to feel for it to lock on that mitre I've already got, lock my hands in that position and just let the legs carry it through. Keep checking you're approaching the lines at the same rate. If you are, get it locked onto that bevel again. I must say, it isn't the most natural motion, sort of getting your arms locked in and then letting your body do all the work, but you get so much control from it doing it this way. Probably quite a good quad workout as well, I'd imagine. So I'm going to lighten off the cut a bit and just do a very light final pass to make sure there's no rough bits. And then we'll do the same on the short sides of the box. Now, in theory, at this point, you don't need to do a stopped chamfer and work through from both sides, because you have removed the material from the opposite side that's potentially going to break out, but I wouldn't risk it. Just continue working through from both sides and then plane out any little bump left in the middle. If you go all the way through, then it's going to work perfectly fine until you get down to the exact depth that you've already cut this previous mitre at. And then once it catches that bit of end grain, that's where the breakout happens. And you might have to replane this mitre, which means that one's too deep, and then you'll have to bring down the rest of them to match. It's not worth risking it. Just work through from both sides. As we've previously done, don't get impatient and lazy with it as much as it's tempting to. To be honest, I'm going to go back to the shoulder plane for this, because I found it much easier than trying to balance that bench plane on there. Not to say it wasn't possible, but it's just a bit easier to do it this way, I found. Okay, so there you go. That is all 4 of the mitres on the plinths cut, and they're looking very nice. However, there is there's just a little bits of adjustment that needs to be done on each of the corners, because nothing annoys me more than seeing end grain visible on a mitre. And while cutting down to these lines, it has cut through the one that's running perpendicular to the one that I'm shaping, and it's exposed a little bit of end grain, which doesn't look great, to be honest. Again, It's one of the things that no one will ever notice when they look at the box, but it's something for you to notice every time you pick it up, and quite often that's worse. So we're going to fix that, but first I am going to plane down the sides of the plinth to make sure there's no fluffy bits left on the corners and make sure that there's no end grain visible on those as well. Once we've got that sorted, we'll do all these tiny adjustments and then we'll be done for this stage. So let's get it clamped up in the vise, and we're just going to clean up this top surface to make sure there's no horrible bits left on it, making sure to only work to halfway and not going off the opposite end. Okay, so I've done a few skims on those faces now and they are looking nice, and I've made sure that there's no exposed end grain on the corners of the flat faces here. Now I'm going to address the end grain that's visible on the miters and then we'll call this stage done. So I can see the end grain is visible on this side here, so it means that I need to plane down this face in order to make it match the mitre on this side. And temptation is to go off the edge like this, especially for me, so then you guys can easily see it on camera. But I am going to have to come from this direction, the direction you're currently looking at, in order to prevent any breakout from happening. So I'm going to feel it lock onto that bevel. Couple of passes, shouldn't take much. I think that's good. However, there is a little step on top of the mitre that I'm now seeing, which I quite fancy cleaning up. This little step on the top edge up here, I reckon I can get rid of that using the shoulder plane. Get rid of this tape. If I get the blade flush with this face, so then I can have that flat against the box. You can see how versatile a shoulder plane is now. It gets you out of so many sticky situations like this. Oh, that looks a million times better now. And there you go, that is all the major constructional work on the box complete. Now, all we've got to do is start planing down some of the edges to be flush and do a bit of general cleanup before then finishing it in our choice of finish, and the box is then done by this point. So you can see once again how much of a saviour the shoulder plane can be in a project like this. If you want to know more about the specific one I'm using in this video, the Veritas medium shoulder plane, there'll be a link to it below, which is the affiliate link as I discussed in the previous episode. There is also an affiliate disclaimer down there as well if you want to read a little bit more about how I work with these companies. But that is it for this lesson. Thank you very much for watching. You're now ready to move on to the next one, which you can do so by clicking the link below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe by pressing the big round subscribe button to the left-hand side of the video. I will see you in the next one.